Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. JC here with another video on Action Taimanin. Today we're gonna revisit the Eleonor limited pack, Prophet Eleonor. But before we start, don't forget to leave a like, share and subscribe if you enjoy the content. So, Prophet Eleonor is probably one of the best character sets in the game, and we gotta analyze what this set offers. So, of course, the pack is going to come with the skin, so if you like the skin, here is a preview of the skin. It is pretty nice. So, the skirt. If you want this one, it is up to you to get it or not. Then we're gonna have Guide of the Starry Sea. Guide of the Starry Sea is definitely a good weapon. There's an issue here. There are two great weapons for Eleanor. We have her character weapon, the character release weapon, Treasure of the Deep Ocean, which provides a better damage per second compared to Guide of the Starry Sea. But a Guide of the Starry Sea is going to give you snare on reflective ray, and that's pretty valuable. Both of these are good. If you want DPS, you want to use Treasure of the Deep Ocean. If you want control, you want to use Guide of the Starry Sea. As simple as that. So, if you already have this 5 out of 5, do you need Guide of the Starry Sea? Well, for the most part, no, you don't need it. It is useful to have it? Yes, for sure. It is useful to have options. But it's up to you whether to roll for this or not, depending on context. What I can tell you is that this is very useful. And you can abuse snares. You can abuse snare builds with this weapon. It is super great for it because though the cooldown is long, the snare effect is going to last just enough for you to then activate a different snare, and then you activate reflective rate again, and the enemy is not going to move. I have done this on Machine BR, which is probably one of the best targets to use those kind of strategies, and it is just amazing. So, on top of that, we have the supporter. We have Prophet Eleonor. So, Prophet Eleonor, it's a usable supporter, it's a decent supporter, it is not busted. Why do I say that it's usable? Because it's going to give you damage per wet enemy. That's important, guys. This is terrible for stages with few enemies. Taimanin, Worm Knight, those are not great targets for Prophet Eleonor. Instead, go with this supporter to LW's Squad, Queen Arachne, or Queen Kanaloa. Those are great targets for this supporter. Why? Because it gives you damage increase by 8%, proportionate to the number of enemies affected by wet status. And if you go red, you're going to be able to inflict wet onto the enemy. And on top of that, if you put this supporter on the main, you get an extra passive that says deals 30% of damage and applies wet status for 5 seconds to one random enemy target every 4 seconds. Has a 50% chance to apply wet status to 4 additional enemies. This at 5 out of 5. Oh, no. It's at max level. This is max level, right? And let's see. The active draws energy from Aquarius, deals damage to all enemies as a waterfall, reduces their speed by 20% for 8 seconds. Nice percentage. The duration is medium low, because 5 is low, 10 is medium, and medium to high. So let's say that it's medium. It's a nice duration, good enough for that 20%. Though the cooldown is horrible at almost 70 seconds. So, yeah. Even so, it's really good because you're going to increase, on average, maybe let's say, what? If you have this 5 out of 5, like 24% damage increase let's say that 3 enemies are alive and with wet, that's good enough. Like especially on LW's squad, that's gonna be super useful, as well as Queen Kanaloa, because those have enemies with high HP, multiple enemies with high HP. The mobs on Queen Kanaloa have very high HP. So yeah, it is not the highest damage increase, but there's advantages to this set because this increases critical rate. And I know we don't crit on VR, but there is something else that we didn't analyze about this one. You snare the enemy? Yes, but you also reduce the critical attack resistance by 10% for 5 seconds when you use reflective rate. Increase critical damage to the enemies under wet by 44. Obviously, you're going to have the enemy under wet. That's pretty simple. The thing is that this is, as a damaging weapon, this is best used on normal content, not on VR. But now we have ways to reduce the critical resistance of the enemy. Not only this is not the best nowadays. It used to be like, wow, this can actually reduce the critical resistance. Now it's like, well, yeah, but it's only 10%. We have better things that shred the enemy's critical resistance. And that helps out so that you can crit and you can get this damage increase. As well as this one. This also helps. So, should you buy it? Should you get it? The weapon is super useful, and I do recommend getting it, spending on this banner for the weapon. The supporter is usable, but it's not as strong as other supporters. It's not going to surpass. Let's go with only red. Let's compare it with red. Um, Spinel, the character releases Spinel, limited supporter, is very good because it gives you 28% damage increase to the Demon type characters' team members, which is pretty nice. Even though the other effect is not useful, that's just better because it gives attack to everyone on the party. This one is going to give you damage increase and damage reduction. And depending on the number of enemies, this might be more than what Proper Eleonor gives. This one is also great because it gives 30%. That's more than the average that I mentioned of 3 enemies having wet, which is going to give us 24% against the 30% here. So, yeah, as you can see, Prophet Eleanor supporter is not a high priority. It is usable. It is there. Wet inflicts a kind of slow that works on stacks. Is not the best thing in the world, but it's there. It is also a debuff that's going to be applied to the enemy, and that is going to allow you to take advantage of Galilim, Susune, and such. So it's also an enabler. You can also see it as an enabler. It's just a free debuff. If you don't have a good Momochi weapon and you have your Susune, have your Garlilim, but you don't have ways to debuff the enemy with the characters that you have, you can see this as an enabler, and that's pretty good too. But in terms of damage, it isn't the best option out there. Just keep that in mind. It is versatile, it is useful, but not a high priority. The weapon, though, I would say is a priority, not exactly the highest priority out there, but good enough to consider. And should you roll? As simple as that. Should you roll on the banner? My recommendation, wait for the information. And if you don't want to wait for the information, I strongly suggest that you roll here. Unless you already clear all the things that you can buy in the Desire Shop, because it was a good month for rolling, then roll here. What do we have here? Do we have Prophet Eleanor? We don't have Prophet Eleanor, but we have White Feather Asuka, Kirara, New Year Felicia, Dark Sun Astaroth, Fuma Saika. And for weapons, let's see. For weapons, we have Ariel, we have Felicia's weapon, we have the Eye of Dawn. So it is just too appealing, as well as Sue. Sue is also a great option. So if you don't want to roll for Prophet Eleanor, there's this, but more importantly, we have to wait for the information of the upcoming limited pack of Francis. So yeah, I know that Francis is kind of wacky, and uh, her leader skill doesn't feel uh, as good to play around. But the character skills are fine for the most part. So if the if we see that the supporter is actually pretty generic and the weapon is decent, we might want to roll for this. So my recommendation: try to hold onto your gems as much as possible until we have the information. Okay, and if you really want to roll for Eleonor, it's not a bad choice. The supporter is not busted, but it's usable, and it has its niches. I think that's how it's said. Anyways, the weapon, I just said it like thrice already. It is great. It is definitely worth it to get. It is a Kirara weapon. That's why I don't see it. So it should be over. Hmm. Where is it? Over here. Yeah. So would I roll on it if I didn't already have it 5 out of 5? Probably. Just having one weapon, it is good enough because of the 5-second snare. You can use. It is not recommended to use Witch because snare isn't a stop. It's recommended instead to use. Where is this one? Kato. It's recommended to use Kato and also use Uriha. And you can also use in your team a character like Sakura. Sakura is an excellent snare unit. So if you want to build a snare team, which is perfectly possible, Sakura is going to be your tank. Sora can be your damage with Kato. So you're going to keep the enemy in snare. And then you just add Eleonor into the mix to keep snaring the enemy. And they're not going to move. It is pretty viable for LWS Squad BR. So keep that in mind. So that's kind of it, guys. I hope you find this useful. I almost forgot. Regarding the nerf ish. So I didn't want to talk about it, but I guess it is important. If you compare the first video where I talk about Eleanor, you're gonna see that these numbers are were changed. Why? Because they made a mistake. I think that it released on the anniversary, and similar to what happened with Phantasma, they didn't correct it on time before their break, so they released it at ease and then they change it, which is a bad thing to do. But unlike Phantasma, I don't think that was a bad change. It wasn't like the most busted thing in the world, but it was pretty strong, too strong. So why? You get stacks of you get damage per each enemy who has wet. So if there are, let's say, 5 enemies and you multiply this by 5, you're gonna get 130 damage increase. There is no supporter in the game that gives you that much damage increase. That's the busted part. The balance in this is that actually you just deal a bunch of damage and you clear the wave of enemies, but there's only one enemy left, and it's gonna give, and it would give you, because it's not the effect, it would give you 26% damage increase against the boss, and that's not as much as let's say an Arabella, okay, or a Misaki. But you clear with the wave of enemies, and that's meaningful. And if they respawn a lot, you can have burst damage, and it just absorb the quantity, the amount of damage that it can deal. So it is a good thing that they corrected this, and they didn't committed to doing the changes, because if that had happened, this supporter would have been very broken, and it would have made every other supporter practically useless, and then there would have been waves of new supporters that go around uh, having 100 damage increase or 100 damage reduction or above, and content should be changed so that it works around those numbers. So it is fine, trust me. Phantasma is a different case because 8% is not gonna be that impactful. It's not the same as having over 100 damage increase. So they should have owned it with Phantasma, but this the nerf slash correction was fine. It was well made because it could have brought more troubles than it was worth it. Trust me. So yeah, that's basically it. Even without the nerf, which it isn't exactly a nerf, it's more like a correction. Um, it is a good supporter, and even with the nerf, it's a good supporter, and we shouldn't complain about it uh, getting the numbers swapped, and we shouldn't insist on getting the numbers swapped. Because trust me, you don't want your other supporters to be worthless, because that change would imply that there are going to be new waves of supporters that need to work around those numbers, making everything that you have practically useless. We don't want that. So, uh, and let's say that we didn't, and this was the only supporter that had that huge amount of burst damage. That would mean that you will be forced to use this supporter, basically. It's either you have the OP option or you have to um, work your way around content other ways. So nobody wants that. So trust me, it is okay. What happened with Eleanor is okay. On the other hand, what happened to Phantasma, which is kind of the same but different, the fact that the percentage is just too small in comparison makes it so that Gremory should have owned their mistake in this case. Unlike Eleanor. Eleanor would have been a disaster if they owned that mistake. So, yeah. Well, that's about it, guys. I hope you find this useful. Please be sure to think carefully about your decisions and wait for the information to be released before you spend your gems. Trust me, you want to do that. So, with that said, that's gonna be it for today, and I'll be seeing you next time. Bye!